It's been a long while since my last Mario 64 Machinima video, and even longer since the last Blooperist episode. Some people have been wondering whether the fabled third episode would ever come, or if I'd ever come back to Machinima at all. And I decided it'd be best that I address that in a little video, and to brush it off in a couple of haphazard comments here and there. For the uninitiated, before I made Super Mario 64 Classified, I started a series of Machinima titled The Blooperists. It followed Greenio, whom the channel is named after if you weren't aware, and her friends as they tried to work their way to success using questionable means. A first episode premiered May 5th of 2020, and a second episode premiered on August 17th of that same year. On November 24th, still in 2020, I uploaded a short preview of what was to be the third episode. I had planned to have it finished by the following summer, but it simply never happened. I've been asked numerous times now what its fate ended up being, and I've since answered with varying degrees of transparency. To set the record straight, episode 3 is indeed cancelled. It's been cancelled since early 2021. My motivation was already low at the time, because a large portion of the project file and its media had been corrupted, and I generally had a negative enough view of the community that I renounced all association. That latter part had essentially creeped its way into the story itself, rendering it incredibly spiteful, and looking back, the way people were just blindingly praising the first two episodes just because they weren't like what SMG4 was doing kind of makes me worried about what kind of person I would have become had that third episode materialized. Thankfully it did not. It does not end there though. The idea of a third episode never really went away, and eventually, while wrapping up work on the Genesis episode of Classified, I started thinking about maybe ending Blooperists altogether. By that point, I did not want this series to exist as a long-term thing, since it was just so drenched in negativity to me. It seemed like a good idea at the time to fully delve into that negativity one last time, just to get it over with. This is what ultimately resulted in Blooperists' Death of the Emperor. That project was essentially just a new draft of the same episode 3 storyline, but given a bit more breathing room with a roughly 35-minute runtime. The cynicism was now at the forefront, and I wanted to make sure that there would be no logical way for the series to continue afterwards. As such, it ended with Greenio being killed off in what was essentially a police shootout. If you remember these two pieces of Blooperist media, they were from that era of development. Eventually, the cynicism really got to me. I had changed a lot as a person since those early drafts, and I felt that they no longer represented a facet of myself that I would be proud of displaying. Rather than starting over, I opted to merely alter the ending a bit. Instead of being killed off, Greenio would merely be whisked away to some other realm, where they'd be reborn in another body reflecting how they identify themselves as, and they'd live on from there, away from the series universe. It was meant to be a rather unsubtle allegory of my own gender identity forms. This was a short-lived era, as I did not think that plot point came about in the most natural of ways. Eventually I tried making it a separate project entirely titled Greenio to Hell and Back, but it didn't fix the issue of that character development coming out of basically nowhere. I've never thought of myself as a particularly capable writer, but this was one of the times where I could tell I was doing an especially bad job. Mind you, this was now the third iteration of that project. I was just about ready to give up, thinking it was pretty much doomed to failure without exception. So I did. The project was effectively dead. Flash forward about a year, I'm doing the animation on Annielogue, and still, I cannot bring myself to let this third episode escape my mind. I did not want there to be this series just rotting away on the channel, without a proper ending. But I couldn't just delve back into the negativity it was associated with either. It was just a miserable time all around, and it's why I had gone through so many iterations already. I thought back to that allegorical alteration I had made the year before, and I decided that, to rectify the problem of its spontaneity, I could simply make it the crux of the story itself. Suddenly, Greenio slowly turned into a much more sympathetic character, and it no longer made sense to follow up on the events that were set up in the first two episodes. This put a considerably more positive spin on the whole ordeal, and my passion for it was reinvigorated tenfold. I had to get this made, both for the sake of the series and my own. Since then, I've been carefully drafting the script for this new incarnation of the Blooperists, as well as numerous concepts for character designs and environments. It's been incredibly fun and challenging to workshop it all. Also, you may have noticed from the concept that it doesn't look much like Mario 64 anymore. I have opted to make all my assets from scratch and to fully animate the project in 3D. Ever since pursuing animation as a career, I have not been able to find it in me to go back to machinima. It's not to discredit it as a medium, I simply cannot go back to that workflow anymore. I find the switch up to be the best decision for the longevity of the project and my progression as an artist. For those still wondering about episode 3, after all that, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree in my opinion. Everything that represented has been effectively replaced with something that is now much more meaningful to me. This is the third official installment in my eyes, but there will never be a third episode of the original series. It can live on as the misguided beginnings of something greater, rather than as a dreadful mistake in my memories. When it gets finished, however many years from now, I hope to find you as eager to watch it as I am now to work on it.